All right, I think I figured out how to turn off my notifications, so we should not be being interrupted by Teams anymore. All right, so our family friendly benefits include things like family leave policies, child care benefits, and elder care assistance. So let's start with family leave policies. The Family Medical Leave Act was signed into law in 1993. And it's a federal law that says you can take up to 12 weeks of job protected unpaid leave. And you can use it for like the birth of a child or the adoption of a child. You can use it for, caring for a sick relative. You can use it for your own personal sickness. People who take FMLA, about 40% of them cut their leave short. And the number one reason they say that they cut their leave short is because they say they can't afford to go that many weeks without being paid. So it protects your job. So you could be gone up to 12 weeks and they can't replace you, but it doesn't pay while you're gone. The state of Washington initiated a Paid Family and Medical Leave Act, and now everybody, all of us who work, pay 73% of the 0.8% of our salary that is required to be put into a fund annually. So we pay into it about 1 week of benefits that we would actually be eligible for if we were having an eligible medical situation. We pay about 1 week's worth of our own benefit, and then we're eligible to collect up to 12 weeks. Our employer puts the rest of the money in. And so if we were to take the family medical leave in the state of Washington, we would be able to collect up to 90% of our normal weekly wage, but it's capped at the weekly wage based on $75,000 a year. So if you earn more than $75,000 a year, you are going to be maxed out, and you can't get your full 90% of your full salary. So it is designed to more benefit people on the lower end who really need that income, and less on people who are on the higher end who maybe could save towards their time off or something like that. So something that people talk about a lot, I teach this class, I also teach human sexuality, and a lot of people throw out that, around the world, they have so much more, maternity leave benefits than we have in the U.S. And I just got done telling you that you get 12 weeks unpaid in the U.S. Our state, you get 12 weeks technically paid, but certainly not your full salary, 90% at best, and that might cap out depending on how much you earn. So you see stuff like this graphic where it shows the U.S. with a big fat 0 weeks of paid leave. And then you look at other countries, like it says Canada gets 50 weeks of paid leave. And you think, wow, how are they getting 50 weeks of paid leave? Or Norway's getting 44 weeks, Italy 22, and you go around here and it goes down and, goes around to like everybody else. The lowest that we're seeing is 12 weeks of paid leave, and here's the big fat 0 on the U.S. And so, I could see where people get the impression that you don't get anything in the U.S. and you get lots of things in other places, right? Other places are much more, they provide a lot more. But we have to be a little bit more careful about how we're interpreting some of these signs. So here we have the U.S. again, we're the big fat 0. And then we see Greece at 26.6. We go around here looking at different countries, seeing different amounts. You notice Canada's not on here with their big braggy 50 weeks. What happened to that? And in fact, the highest thing we're seeing is this 26.6, which is Greece. What had Greece even appeared here? No. So why are we comparing different? Why is every one of these, why is business.org showing one thing and Liberation showing another thing? Like, what is happening? Why are different countries being highlighted? And, why is this one, the highest one is showing 26.6, and on the previous one, the highest one was 50 weeks? Maybe they're not measuring paid the same way, right? Like in Washington, we have 12 weeks of paid time off. And in the best of circumstances, you're getting 90% of your normal salary, right? So maybe it's the way they're defining paid. So this is the number of weeks of government mandated, so that means the employer has to let you do this, maternity leave. Number of weeks of government mandated maternity leave. The green parts of each bar represent for us the full-time equivalent, it's called. So they're getting paid the equivalent of their full-time salary. Now it's called a full-time equivalent because a lot of times when you're getting these benefits, they are not taxable. And so it's a full-time equivalent, meaning you're getting what the net take-home pay would be, not necessarily your gross that then gets taxed. So FTE is in the green bar, and then the unpaid is in the red bar. And then I actually made this chart. So I went through, oh my gosh, all the data, and I tried to do one cohesive, comparable, we all mean the same words in all these countries depiction. So here we are. So business.org had pretty good numbers because Greece really is about 26 weeks of full-time equivalent pay. And then you get up to, you could take as much as 42 weeks or 43 total weeks off, but some of that's going to be unpaid. In the UK, we have about 12 weeks of paid leave, and then we have a full-time equivalent paid leave, and then we have up to 38 weeks total that you can take, with most of it being unpaid. Okay, so here's Canada. Check out Canada. We have 50 weeks off for maternity leave on the Liberation Panel. They actually get 8 weeks of fully paid, full-time equivalent time off. And then they get another they could be gone as much as 16 weeks government mandated. Different provinces might have different rules, but the government national law is that you have to be allowed 16 weeks off, and only half of it has to be paid. And by the way, a lot of times what they'll say is, oh no, we're paying them for the whole 16 weeks off, but you're only getting half pay. So I condensed the green bars down into the full-time equivalent. How long are you getting that? You might be able to spread it out, but you're only getting half your pay for 16 weeks, right? So we have some countries like Spain, you only get 16 weeks off and you're paid the whole time, full-time equivalent for the whole 16 weeks that you're off. Slovakia, you are given 26 weeks off, and so on. So you can kind of see that it's not quite what liberation implied, right? And then I made this purple line because I got to thinking about the role of population and support for people increasing the population, right? In a country where you have a lot of people, there's less, and a lot of babies being born and things like that, there's less motivation to encourage people to have babies. You might want to encourage them to work rather than encourage them to have babies. And whereas if you have a smaller country that maybe the population isn't growing very well, you might want to encourage people to have babies. That's what they're doing in Greece. That's what they're doing in Slovakia. They're having a lot of difficulty with the very, very low birth rates in these countries. And so they're trying to encourage people to have babies by supporting them after the birth of their baby. So over here on the U.S., I was like, the national laws, you do not get paid at all. I guess I could have done a red bar at least for the U.S., where there could at least be a red bar for 12 weeks over here on the U.S. But I wanted to point out, look at the size of the population compared to all these other countries. Our population number is all the way up here at 330 something million. And these other countries that we're being compared to, their populations are very small. Mexico is like our peak over here. Japan's our peak over here. You'll notice I don't have like India on here. I don't have China on here. Those are going to blow our number away, but they're not on here. I couldn't find data on them. And so growing the population, like in Japan, they are desperate to grow their population right now. And they're doing things, really dramatic things, to try and make it possible for a work-life balance that would allow people to have babies. So it's not surprising that they might have better pay and support for people to stay home with their babies. So I just wanted to put that perspective out there as far as like, I think a lot of information is out there about how other countries support families after the birth of babies. And the one outlier I would like to offer is the UK. They have a lot of unpaid time off. That's a lot of unpaid time. Most countries don't have that. But what I did was I calculated a little correlation between the population of the country and then the FTE that they offered. And that's a pretty strong correlation. So the bigger the correlation is negative. So the bigger the population, the fewer weeks of time off that is offered. And that's around the world, right? So kind of an interesting little correlation between those things. The other thing I'd like to point out is that while it's not federally mandated, a lot of U.S. companies offer way more than like countries around the world that we point to. Walmart offers, I can't remember how many weeks this is. It's something like 12 weeks of paid maternal leave. And then they offer another like 6 weeks of unpaid if you wanted to stay out. They give paternity leave at Walmart. Kroger, which is a grocery store that does like I think they do Fred Meyer and I think Albertsons kind of thing. So they have a little, it's smaller than Walmart, but we got some paid time off that's more than you have to do, federally mandated. Yum Brands, IBM, the Home Depot, McDonald's, Berkshire Hathaway, which is some kind of financial. Notice that that's not very long that's not a very long time off. I think that's like 6 weeks for the birth of a child for a woman to take. Amazon gives a very long time. FedEx does a pretty decent amount of pay, then some unpaid if you want. UPS, much longer on the unpaid. Different companies offer more. It's one of those incentives for people to join the organization if they know that they're looking forward to one day having children. Here we have the length of parental leave for 1,100 different U.S. companies. So each of those dots that you're looking at represents one of the companies. And we've got the paternity leave at the bottom in blue, and we've got the maternity leave at the top in the pink. And you see on the far right over there, it says Netflix allows for 52 weeks of paid leave for both parents regardless of sex. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation allows for 52 weeks of parental leave regardless of gender. So they didn't replicate those dots in both places. The majority of American companies allow for between 6 and 12 weeks of paid maternity leave. The average length of paid paternity leave offered by American companies is 4.5 weeks. That's pretty good for, compared to what it was like 30 years ago when I had babies. The paternity leave wasn't a thing. If you were lucky, the baby would be born on the weekend and your boss might let you have Monday off. It's like they didn't used to have paternity leave at all. And so this is really big growth in like 30 years in the things that companies are offering. And they're doing it because they're recognizing that it's investing in their employees who then in turn are more loyal to the organization when they come back. And that's a benefit to the organization. So they're figuring that out. There's an increasing availability of maternity leave for some employees, though. You'll notice a lot of the organizations I pointed to where I had names are like really big organizations. It turns out that there's a correlation between the amount of education that the woman has and then the likelihood that they are actually going to experience paid leave for the birth of a child. It's been getting better over time. I mean, if you look over here on the far left, there was very little maternity leave offered for anyone in the 1960s. Got a little bit better by the 1970s. By the 1980s, it's getting better, especially for those who were high school, some college, or college educated. And as we continue to go on, we see those bars getting farther and farther apart, right? Where you're seeing the benefits of a bachelor's degree kind of amplifying and the deficits of just a high school diploma amplifying. But by 2006, 2008, which is the most recent data I could find, we see that, the people who have some college or a bachelor's degree, about half to 2/3 are experiencing paid leave before and after the birth of a child. If you don't have a high school diploma or you are only a high school graduate, you're looking at 1/3 or less that are experiencing that kind of paid leave. So there's definite, economic disparity on that. All right, well, I feel like that's a good time to stop. We'll come back and we'll talk about childcare benefits as one of those benefits that could be part of your package.